Well, good morning, and welcome to North Point. If this is your first time here, I want to welcome you. My name is Richard Hell. I'm a volunteer here at North Point. If this is your first time here, I want to welcome you to North Point and let you know that we have something in common. This is actually my first time here at North Point on this stage. And if you've been coming to North Point for a while, I want to welcome you as well and give you a good explanation as to why I'm actually standing here this morning. And I got two good explanations. So my good friend, Mick Hooper, who's also a volunteer here at North Point, and our lead pastor, Pastor Buck Giebelhaus, I think he should go to heaven just for pronouncing his name. Pastor Buck Giebelhaus, right? They got together and said, we have a group of men at North Point that's underrepresented. And we want you to represent those men. We think that you would be good at representing those men that are underrepresented here at North Point. So I said, well, who are this group of men that's underrepresented? And they go, all the men that are either losing their hair or all the men that have actually lost their hair. We want you to stand before the group of people and represent those men and let them know that they're beautiful, that they're loved, and God only made a few perfect heads, and the rest of them, he put hair on. That's my story. My name is Richard. I'm your friend, and I'm sticking to that story. We got to introduce a brand new series this month called Let the Games Begin, and I'm really so excited about this series. So if you're like me, in school, I played basketball, I played tennis, and I played baseball. And all those games that we play in high school and in college have one thing in common. There's a winner and there's a loser. And when we transfer that into relationships, it can be devastating. So the goal in relationships, whether it's a friendship or a marriage or a dating relationship, is to create a win-win in the relationship. So for the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about some things and hopefully give you some tools where you can actually create a win-win in all of your relationships. But before I get started, I want to tell you a little bit about my family and also tell you a little bit about me so you can feel like I'm really your friend. So this is my lovely wife. And if you look at this picture, you can tell that I'm really overmarried. I can't figure out why in the world she's with me, but I'm going to keep her, right? And if you notice in the picture, what she does is she waits for me to get dressed. And she goes, he's wearing these colors, so she matches me. Boy, I tell you, I'm a lucky man, right? And she matches me, so it's just really good. This is a picture that we took at the John Maxwell Certification Program in 2015. So by profession, I am a speaker, trainer, and a coach, and an author. And so she accompanied me with the John Maxwell program, and I'm just really excited. So that's my lovely wife. Her name is Kim. This next picture is my beautiful daughter. Her name is Kanisha. Kanisha is 28 years of age. And this picture that you see right here is a picture that I was getting ready to take her to the prom. So it was a prom dedicated to kids with special needs. And so I wish you could have been there for the conversation that I had with her when I asked her to be my date to the prom. And she goes, why are you taking me to the prom? Shouldn't you be taking mommy? And it took me a little while to convince her that I want to take you to the prom. I want to go with the beautiful, most beautiful girl in the whole world. Will you honor me and be my date to the prom? So she finally said, okay. So we made a big deal out of it. So we got up that morning, we fixed breakfast. I took her to the nail salon, and we both got manicures. Yeah, I got a manicure as well. And we got pedicures, and I didn't get my eyebrows arched. She got her eyebrows arched, and we went out for lunch. And then I came home. I watched her get dressed. I matched her. So, I think we look pretty cute together. Then I took her in a nice little car, and we got to the church that was holding the prom, and they actually put her in a limousine and rode her around to the front, and they actually rolled out the red carpet. And, man, I tell you, we had a really good time. They really made the kids really feel special. So it was a very good time for me and my daughter, probably one of the best times we ever had in our life. So my personal opinion is I think the greatest gift that we can all give our children is our time. I think it's great that we give them cell phones, we give them cars, but the greatest gift that we can actually give our children is really our time. So that's my oldest daughter. Her name is Kanisha. She's 28. These next couple pictures are my other two kids. That beautiful lady in the middle is still my wife. And that young lady next to her is our next to the oldest child. Her name is LaShonda. LaShonda spent about 8 years in the United States Army, and she got out, and now she lives in New York, and she's going to school. That young man that's standing next to her is our son, Jahari. Jahari is 24, and Jahari is actually in the Air Force. He's been in the Air Force for about 6 years. And last week on vacation, we got the opportunity to spend some time with both of them. And I don't know if we have anybody here from New York or from D.C. It's just my personal opinion. I think if you're from New York, California, D.C., that you should go to heaven simply because you have to fight the traffic. When I got back from D.C., I was so stressed that I had to go to counseling. I can't quite figure out why anybody would live there. Everything is just such a hustle and bustle, and it just was, I don't know, because I had to go to counseling when I got back. But those were my kids. So we have a 28-year-old, a 26-year-old, and a 24-year-old. And me and my wife, we've been married for 7 years. Now, if you're like me, I know you're wondering, how is it that you've been married for 7 years, but yet you have a 28-year-old daughter, a 26-year-old, and a 24-year-old kid? I'm glad you asked. See, I'm in a blended family. But before me and my wife got married, we agreed that we would simply not play the my kid, your kid game. So when we got married, we said that all the kids are ours. So when you look up the word blended, it means this: to combine two separate parts. But once those parts are combined, those parts cannot be distinguished. So the only way, for the most part, that you could tell that my family is blended is that we tell you. So when I married my wife, I also married her 2 daughters. That's a little bit about my family. Now let me just tell you just a little bit about me. I'm from a little small town in Mississippi called Meridian, which is about 87 miles east of Jackson, which is the capital. And I was fortunate when I grew up. I had the opportunity to grow up with both of my parents. But my parents had a very interesting relationship. See, my father slept in my room, and my mother slept in a completely different room. Now, I have no idea how that I'm here today, because they always slept in separate rooms. So I have no idea how I was conceived, because since I can remember, they simply slept in separate rooms. And growing up, I just thought that's what we did. I thought you get married and you sleep in separate rooms. Little did I know that that was actually dysfunctional. So my parents played a different type of game. My parents played what I call the roommate game. And it may not be applicable to anybody here at North Point, but the roommate game looks a little something like this. See, I got my bills, and you got your bills. And at the end of the month, you better make sure that you don't come up short, because see, if you come up short, you got to call your mother, your brother, your sister, your father, maybe even your best friend, because I am not going to pay your bills for you. Because, see, we are married, but in reality, see, we're simply just roommates. See, roommates share the same common space, but when you become teammates, teammates share the same common goal. So my parents were married, but see, they was actually simply just roommates. Or maybe, since it's summertime, just maybe, you're getting ready to plan your vacation. But see, we're going to plan a vacation, but we're going to plan a vacation separate from one another. We're not going to go on vacation together. So you're going to go up north, I'm going to go down south, and just maybe at the end of our vacation, if we have time to spend time together, just maybe, we can spend maybe an hour, 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours together by time. See, we're married, but at the end of the day, we're simply roommates. Or what it really boils down to is this. See, you don't bother me, and I won't bother you. See, my parents were married, but they were simply just roommates. Not only did my parents have a very interesting relationship as to how they dealt with each other, it was very interesting how they dealt with me. My parents went to their grave, and they never uttered the words, "I love you." I never saw my mom tell my dad that she loved him. I never saw my mom hug my dad. My mom and my dad never went to anywhere together. They went somewhere together. They went separately. They had a very interesting relationship. They never hugged. They never kissed. They never embraced. They just kind of tolerated each other. And that was kind of like the same relationship that they had with me. My parents never communicated with me. See, they never told me that they thought I was handsome. They never told me that they thought I was smart. They never told me that they was proud of me as their son. They never expressed those things. Until the day my parents died, to me, they never uttered the words, "I love you." And the closest that I came to hugging my parents was when I was being disciplined. So if I wanted some attention from my parents, I had to do something that was inappropriate, because that just wasn't normal in my household for us to say things of that nature. So because of this lack of validation, I grew up with low self-esteem. There was many days that I wouldn't smile, and when I smiled, I would put my hand on my face because I had low self-esteem. I was scared to talk to people of the opposite sex because I had low self-esteem. I felt devalued and I wasn't valued. Didn't feel as if I was worth anything as a young man. But despite growing up with low self-esteem, I still managed to matriculate through high school. Because although I had low self-esteem, I never wanted to fail. So by the time I got to high school, it was getting close to me to graduate, and I was filled with trepidation. And the reason that I was filled with trepidation, because see, there's two great days in a person's life. See, the day that person was born and the day that person recognizes why. See, without understanding your why, you don't understand your purpose. And when you don't understand your purpose, you simply do not have clear direction. So as a result, my high school teacher thought I was a great communicator. So she told me, you should go to school, Richard. You should go to college. Because I never considered college. You should go to college, and you should major in mass communication. And since I didn't have a plan and I didn't have a purpose, see, her purpose and her plan sound very good to me. So I said, I'm going to go to college. So I went to college, and I majored in mass communication. But when I got to college, I was in for a shock. Because what I realized when I got to college, college was hard. They actually wanted me to come to class. They wanted me to do something like study. And because I was not disciplined enough at that time, I wasn't disciplined. I lasted for about 2 years. I had about 15 credit hours. And before they kicked me out, because I had a little bit of pride, I decided to drop out of college. So now I'm depressed. What in the world am I going to do? I'm 22 years of age. What am I going to do? So I thought to myself, my oldest brother was in the Army. My father was in the Army. Just maybe I could join the United States military. So I raised my hand, and for 23 years, I served in the United States Army. Once I got out, which is right up the street here at Fort Hood, I decided to migrate down here to Austin, Texas. Was at Sam's Boathouse one day, met a young lady by the name of Lauren. She told me about North Point, and I've been here ever since. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. My name is Richard, and I'm your friend. But today, we're going to talk about Let the Games Begin. And I mentioned earlier how that in relationships, there are a lot of games that we can play. But the deadliest game that we can play when it comes to relationships is what I call the me and I game. And I played that game really good growing up because I would befriend people based upon how it benefited me. See, if you had a car, I would want to befriend you because you could drive me around. See, if you dated girls, I wanted to befriend you because how it could benefit me. So the deadliest game that me and you can play when it comes to our relationships is what I call the me and I game. It's responsible for the death and destruction of all relationships. So because of what I do, I have the opportunity to talk to couples on a regular basis. And every time I talk to couples, I ask one question. What is it in your relationship, whether you're dating or whether you're married, what is it in your relationship that's causing the most friction? What is it in your relationship that's causing you to want to separate? And if you're married, what is it in your relationship that's causing you to want to go talk to a divorce lawyer? And invariably, these three things pop up. They say, Richard, it's the finances. See, it's the finances in my relationship that's causing the most problems. Then some people say, no, Richard, it's for us. It's not the finances. It's the communication or the lack thereof in our relationship that's causing us to have all these different problems. Then some people say, no, it's not finances or communication. It's the infidelity that we were experiencing that's causing all the heartache in my dating relationship, my friendship, or my marriage. And see, the problem with all three of these is that there are symptoms, and they are not the source of the problem. So if you go to counseling or you talk to someone, you talk about your finances, you talk about your communication, or you talk about the infidelity, but those are simply symptoms. The source of every downfall, the source of every tension point in every relationship, was a friendship, was a marriage, or was a dating relationship, is selfishness. And see, those are simply symptoms. And if you never get to the source of the problem, your whole time dating, your whole time with your friends, or your whole time in your marriage relationship, all you will be doing is talking about the symptoms. And you never get to the source of the problem. So the source of every issue is selfishness, which results in it's all about me and it's all about I. So when it comes to my finances, see, Leaf Johnson just sent me a letter in the mail, let me know they got a sale on that platinum F-150 4x4 that I've been wanting for years. And despite the fact that it's going to create less margin, despite the fact that it's going to cause friction within my marriage. See, I'm going to go buy it anyway, despite the fact that I have not communicated with my spouse, despite the fact that it's going to blow us out of our budget, despite the fact no matter what it does, because see, it's all about satisfying Richard. As long as I do that, I am demonstrating that I'm selfish. So it's not about the car, not about the truck. It's about the fact that Richard is being selfish. Or maybe when it comes to communication, because I'm the communicator in the relationship. Just maybe because my spouse is talking to me, and in the midst of her trying to relay her point to me, I cut her off. Because see, what I got to say has more value than what you have to say. And little do I know when it comes to communicating, see, she will not listen to me till she first realized that she has been heard. And if nobody is listening, nothing is going to get resolved. So if I cut her off in the midst of the conversation, that's about me, and that's about I, and that's selfishness. Or just maybe, when it comes to infidelity, I call it what I call the 80-20 rule. You see, my wife does 80% of all the things that I like. She does 80% of all the things that I like, but there's 20% that she's missing. So now I go to work, and Pam is talking to me. And Pam is talking to me about all the things that she does, and just so happens that's the 20% that she's talking about that my wife don't do. So now I begin to think, by talking to Pam, that the grass might just be a little greener on the other side. And little do I know that, see, the grass is never greener on the other side. The grass is only green where it's being watered. So if I decide to go outside of my relationship for another person, outside of my spouse, see, that's really me being selfish. So the greatest deterrent, the thing that causes the most tension, the thing that causes couples to separate, it's not finances, it's not communications, it's not infidelity. Those are simply symptoms. The source of all those problems is I am committed to making sure that if anybody in this relationship is going to be satisfied, it's going to be me. And you are going to be last. So Paul, one of the greatest of all the apostles, and I love Paul. Because see, you often hear people say that don't talk to your single friends because you can't get good advice about marriage or about relationships from your friends that don't have nobody. Well, Paul defied all that. Paul was not married. Paul did not have any kids, but yet oftentimes when we talk about relationships in any capacity, we refer to Paul. So Paul is writing a letter to the people at Corinth. And Paul knew that the people in Corinth had skills. And he knew that the people in Corinth had talents. But it was a group of people that was filled with me and I. So this is what Paul had to say to that group of people. And it looks something like this. Paul said, I can speak in the tongues of men and of angels. He said, but if I don't have love, then he goes on to say, I am nothing but a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. I'm not really saying anything. Then he says this, I can have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and have all knowledge. And if I have not faith that can move, or I have faith that can move mountains, but I do not have love, Paul is saying, I am nothing. Then he goes on to say this. He said, if I give all of my possessions to the poor, now that sounds great. I'm going to give all my possessions to the poor, and I'm going to give my body over to hardship. But watch this. The only reason that I am doing that, the only reason that I am befriending you, the only reason that I want to marry you, the only reason I want to do this, the only reason I want to do that is so I can both. See, it's not about you. See, it's really all about me. I want you to see that I just gave. I want you to see that I just did. It's all about me. Then he goes on to say, but I do not have love. Paul says, I absolutely gain absolutely nothing. Then he says this. These are the characteristics of love. He said, this is what love looks like. Paul says love is patient. He says love is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not boast. Love is not proud. Love does not dishonor others. Love is not self-seeking. Love is not easily angered. And love is not walking around keeping a record of wrong. I forgave you what you did 6 months ago, but because I always want to have one up on you, every time we get into a disagreement, I'm going to make sure I remind you that 6 months ago you did this. Love don't operate that way. So the greatest deterrent in all of our relationships is me and I. Because see, love is simply not self-seeking. Love is not self-seeking. Love is always looking out for what's in the best interest of the other person. So what if there was a game that me and you could play that could be advantageous to our relationships? What if there's a game that we could play that could create a win-win? I think there is. And that game is called, instead of playing the me and I game, what if me and you learned how to play the submit and serve game? What if we learned how to play the submit and serve game? Now, if you happen to be a female in the room and you hear that word submit, it's probably going to create some tension. But my name is Richard, and I'm your friend. And if I had heard this word explained by clergymen, if I'd heard my husband use that word the way that we've used that word, I would also feel some tension. I would also feel some resistance. I would also feel right now, I would also feel some pushback. But just keep in mind that my name is Richard, and I'm your friend. Just stay with me. Now, when you look up this word submit, one of the synonyms for the word submit is to yield to. So instead of using the word submit, I'm going to use them interchangeably. I might say submit, or I might use the word yield. Now, each and every day, me and you submit and me and you yield, and we do it so often that we do it unconsciously. So what are some of the things that me and you submit to and yield to each and every day? You might be familiar with this. See, it's called a yield sign. And if you drive, you might be familiar with this sign. And normally when you see a yield sign, that means the other person has what we call the right of way. And what that other person is hoping for, and what that other person is praying for that has the right of way, he's hoping and praying that the person that's approaching that yield sign is not a me or an I person. Because he knows that that person approaching that yield sign is a me or an I person is going to cause an accident. It's going to cause an accident. So he's hoping that as that person approaches, that they will yield or they will submit to the yield sign. Because see, they know where there's no yielding or there's no submitting, there's devastation, destruction, and death. Then every now and then, you come across those people that'll get to two yield signs. And they'll get to the yield signs at the exact same time. And it's really funny to watch this transpire. So they don't know each other. And they look at each other and go, you go first. They go, no, you go first. No. What you got to do is probably far more important than what I got to do. No, you go first. No, I'm willing to yield to you and allow you to go first, even though I don't know who you are. I don't know what your agenda is. I don't know where you're going, but I am willing to allow you to go first. And I don't even know you. So either way it goes, every day, we are going to yield. We are going to submit to something. We are going to yield. We are going to submit to something. So the Apostle Paul, again in Ephesians, the 5th chapter, says this. He says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So my submission or my yielding to my spouse is really out of my submission to Christ. I am going to submit to my spouse, but it's really out of reverence for Christ. So we are going to submit one to another. So we call this, and you may have heard this term before, we call this mutual submission competition. This is a game changer. Whether it be a friendship, whether it be a marriage or a dating relationship, when we become mutually submitted to one another, this changes the game. So because I'm a business coach, I look at everything from a business perspective. Before me and my wife got married, we looked at this word submission, and we thought about it. Say, how can we take this word submission and make it more comprehensive before our marriage? So when you look up the word submit has two components. It says sub, which means under, and mission, which means purpose. So before me and my spouse got married, and I'm not telling you this is something you have to do, but it's just something me and my wife did that's been advantageous for our marriage. So what we did is we created a mission statement or a purpose statement for our marriage that looks something like this. To have a lasting marriage, worthy of emulation, always looking to our Heavenly Father, who we are fully conscious as to where our guidance will come from. That's the mission statement that hangs above our fireplace. So every time you walk into our house, first thing you see is our mission statement, our commitment to each other, which makes me accountable to you. But let's break this down into some smaller components. Now, to have a lasting marriage. So we agreed prior to getting married that, see, divorce was simply not going to be an option. See, when divorce is an option, that means I got one foot in and I got one foot out. And the foot that's on the outside always going to carry more weight than the foot that's on the inside of the house. So we just agreed that divorce would simply not be an option. So we don't talk about divorce. We don't watch divorce court. We know that divorce for us is simply not an option. So when there's an impasse in our marriage, we think about how we can resolve it versus how we can resolve or dissolve the marriage. So we just said that divorce would simply not be an option. We stuck with each other. Then we looked at this and go, look, how can we look at this and even simplify this even more? So we took 5 things that we thought we could agree to that would make it easy for us to even submit. Spiritual agreement. We thought before our marriage and during our marriage, if we could agree spiritually, it would minimize us even having to talk about divorce, where God would be the nucleus of our relationship. Number 2, emotionally. We all going through something or coming out of something. If we can agree emotionally, if we could agree financially, how we would spend money, how we would save money, and how we'd invest money. If we could agree sexually, that my wife would only be the only woman I need, and I would be the only man that my wife needs. I couldn't imagine in a million years how my wife could want another man after being with me. Right? But if we could agree sexually that we would be there to satisfy one another. And then the last thing, if we could agree parentally. We have a blended family. So how can we operate in a blended family? We can operate in unison. And we just believe that if we could agree on those 5 things, that what it would do for our marriage, it would form a perimeter around our marriage and cause both of us to submit and serve, as well as not allow me and I to penetrate our relationship. Then the next portion is that we wanted a marriage that was worthy of emulation. See, we have 3 kids, and we know that our children are going to be what they see and not necessarily what we say. So we wanted a marriage where our children could look at us and go, I want a man that's going to treat me just the exact same way that my father treats my mom. And my son could say, I want a woman that's going to treat me the exact same way that my mother treats my dad. We want to be the example for our kids where they didn't have to look outside the house for what we call a healthy relationship. We wanted to be the example for our kids. Then the last portion of our mission statement is to always look to our Heavenly Father for who we are fully conscious as to where our guidance will come from. That's what me and my wife chose to do, to help us and allow us to serve and to submit one to another. We created a purpose statement for our relationship. Now, the next part of the scripture that Paul is going to talk about is going to create a little bit more tension. But hopefully we can relieve some of that tension today. So in the 22nd verse of this scripture, where Paul is still talking about submit, he says this. He says, wives. He uses that word submit again. He says, yield yourselves to your own husbands as unto the Lord. Then he says, for the husband is the head of the wife. So in the past, this is where me as a man will stick my chest out and go, you're supposed to submit to me because the Bible says you're supposed to submit to me because I'm the head. And you're right, that's in there. But see, this is the problem. For the most part, nobody has showed us what that actually looks like to be the head. Because see, all that really means is as a husband, I am supposed to provide leadership and I am more accountable than my spouse. So most of us as men have not seen what that actually looks like. So Christ gave us a good example. So right before the Passover feast, Christ gets all his disciples around. And he gets on one knee. And he looks at them. He pours water into a basin. And they are looking at him saying, this is our head. This is our leader. What in the world is he doing? Then he begins to wash the disciples' feet. So Peter sees this. And Peter goes, Master, teacher, are you going to wash my feet? He says, Peter, if I don't wash your feet, you can't have no part with me. Then Peter looked at him and go, don't want to wash my feet. wash my whole body. Then he says this. See, Peter, right now, you don't understand what you do, but you're going to understand this, see, a little bit later. See, at some point, while I'm washing your feet, what I'm actually showing you is this. At some point, you're going to help wash other people's feet, and you guys are going to wash each other's feet. Then he says this, which is profound. He said, the reason that I'm doing this is so that I can serve as an example to show you what it's like to serve and submit one to another. See, leadership is not about me hovering over my children or my spouse, dictating. See, if I want my spouse and my children to be submissive, then what should happen is they should first see me submitting. If they first see me submitting, it makes it much easier for them to submit. Because see, if I am not willing to serve beneath me, then it's going to be difficult for me to lead beyond me. So Christ gave us the example when it comes to leading, is that we lead through serving. That's the example the head is supposed to set. Then he goes on to say, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church and his body, of which he is also the Savior. Then he says this, now as the church submits to Christ, so also let the wives submit to their husbands in everything. Then watch this. He says, husbands, love your wives. Now, isn't it interesting that in this text, he doesn't tell my wife to love me? He only tells me to love her. She is supposed to yield, and she's supposed to submit, but he's telling me that I am supposed to love. And it's also mutual submission. Then it goes on to say, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. So what does that actually look like? That means when we get to the yield sign, I'm going to tell her as the head or as the leader, you can go first. You go first. I'm willing to let you go first, and I'm willing to be last. I'm willing to set the example. Now, I find it interesting that he don't tell the man or the woman to love. He just tells the man to love. Now, when we get to this next verse, this next passage, he's going to talk about the characteristics, once again, of love. And everywhere we see love, I'm going to substitute the word I. Watch this. I am patient. I am kind. I will not envy. I will not boast. I am not proud. I will not dishonor others. I will refuse. I simply refuse to be self-seeking. I'm going to always look out for what's in your best interest, not my best interest. Then I am not easily angered. I will not keep any record of wrong. Then he goes on to say, I will not delight in evil, but I will rejoice in the truth. I will always protect. I will always love. I will always hope, and I will always persevere. And this is just my personal opinion. I just believe if I love my spouse like that, see, the scripture don't have to tell her to love me, because when she sees me loving her the same way that Christ loved us, it's called the law of reciprocity. She's going to love me right back in return. And watch this, man. We lead the pathway for submission with our spouses. See, if I love her like that, it makes her willingly, and it makes the children willingly want to submit to me, because they see that I am being submissive and I am loving and I am putting them first. And when they see that, they simply want to submit by will and not by force. Because see, as leaders, we got two choices. We can lead by our disposition, which is telling her, you should submit. Or we can lead by our character, which is showing her and showing the children what submission actually looks like. So we got two choices. We can either serve ourselves or we can serve others, whether it be a dating relationship or marriage. One of them is going to lead to years of contentment. One of them is going to lead to years of frustration. So here's my challenge. I don't know what it is your spouse or your friends might want. Maybe your friends that you're friends with would like for you to sit down with them one day and not say anything and just listen. And maybe that's how you can submit and serve to your friends just by sitting there and just listening. And maybe when it comes to the dating relationship, maybe the person that you're dating would love to go X, Y, Z, love to go here. And maybe they would love if you just took them to their favorite place, their favorite restaurant. And that's how you can show that you want to serve and submit unto them. And maybe if you're married, maybe you can take care of the kids for the spouse and you clean out. I don't know what it might be. But whatever it might be, let it be that thing that's going to cause you the greatest tension, but it adds the greatest value to your spouse, to your friends, and to your children. And then they're going to say, because they're so happy that you did that thing, they're going to say, thank you so much. And because they're going to say thank you, you're going to be tempted to say, you're welcome. But instead, you're going to act as if you're a Chick-fil-A employee. And if you've ever been to Chick-fil-A and you order some food, they never tell you you're welcome. They look at you and they smile and they go, it was my pleasure. Why? Because the it is my pleasure has greater implication of serving and submitting than you're welcome. And that little phrase can change your friendships, can change your dating relationships, and can also change your marriage by simply saying, I love serving you, and it was my pleasure. So we got two choices. Either I'm going to serve and submit to you, or I am going to serve and submit to myself. Let me pray for today's time. Father God, I just thank you for our time that we spent together today. And I pray that as we leave this place, you ask all of us, starting with me, to examine myself and ask myself, if this relationship that I'm in, my friendship, my marriage, or my dating relationship, is it about me? Or am I exemplifying you by my willingness to place the other person first? Thank you for your time, and we'll see you next week.